Hey everyone, and welcome. So, you're gearing up for your important exams, and then you hit that dreaded topic, national income. Well, you are not alone. But what if I told you that in the next few minutes, you're not just going to understand this topic, but you're going to master it and make it your biggest strength? Let's get started. Does this alphabet soup of economic terms look familiar? GDP, GNP, NDP, NNP. It's so easy to get tangled up in these. But don't you worry. This is one of the most common points of confusion, and today we're going to clear this up for good. And we're going to do it fast. Here's the deal. In the next 5 minutes, we're not just going to understand the important concepts of national income, we are going to master them. So buckle up and let's dive right in.
So, first things first, we need to build a solid foundation. What exactly is national income? And more importantly for your exam, why do examiners just love asking questions about it?
Okay, now look closely at this slide, because the keywords here are everything. National income is the total money value of all final goods and services produced by the residents of a country within a single financial year. And remember, we're only talking about final goods, not the intermediate stuff. Why? To avoid counting the same thing twice. Simple.
So why is this such a big deal? Well, because national income is like the report card for a country's economy. It measures growth, it helps the government plan budgets and policies, it's how we compare our economy with other nations, and, it even brings important issues like income inequality to the forefront. It's a really big deal.
All right, now that we know why it's important, let's meet the two superstars of this whole story, GDP and GNP. Getting a handle on these two is basically the key that unlocks everything else.
GDP, or Gross Domestic Product. You've probably heard this term 1,000 times. The key word here, the one you absolutely have to remember, is location. GDP measures everything produced within a country's geographical borders, no matter who produces it. Think of it as the country's domestic territory.
And here's the famous formula for calculating it. Let's break it down real quick. C is for consumption. That's all the stuff you and I buy. I is for investment, like new machinery for factories. G is what the government spends. And that last part, X minus M, that's just net exports. Our total exports minus our total imports.
Now this slide. This one brilliantly sums up the core difference between GDP and GNP. GDP is all about the domestic territory, what's made inside the country's borders. But GNP, Gross National Product, is all about the country's nationals, what's produced by the country's residents no matter where they are in the world.
Let's see how this builds. To get from GDP to GNP, we just add one thing called Net Factor Income from Abroad, or NFIA. Think of it this way. If an Indian citizen is working in America, their income gets added to India's GNP. But if an American citizen is working in India, their income gets subtracted. See? That's how we shift the focus from location to resident.
Okay, so we've cracked gross domestic and gross national. But what about those net values, like NDP and NNP? How do we make the jump from gross to net? The answer is just one simple word: depreciation. Think of it as the wear and tear on machinery and equipment over the year. You know how your phone gets a little slower and loses value over time? It's the same idea with a factory's machines. So when you subtract this value from any gross figure, you get its net version. It's really that simple. Gross minus depreciation equals net.
All right, now that we have this magic key, depreciation, let's quickly unlock the two net concepts: net domestic product and net national product.
This flows perfectly from what we just talked about. To get net domestic product, or NDP, you just take GDP and subtract depreciation. And for net national product, or NNP, you guessed it, you take GNP and subtract depreciation. And here's a huge exam tip for you. NNP is often just called national income at market price. Don't forget that. Okay, so we've talked about the income of the entire country. But how does that massive number actually trickle down into the pockets of regular people and households like ours? Let's decode that. Just follow the flow here. We start with the big number, national income. Then we take away the things that people don't actually receive, like corporate taxes. Next, we add back the things people do receive, like pensions, and that gives us personal income. And finally, once you've paid your personal taxes, what's left over is your disposable personal income, or DPI. That right there is your real purchasing power. So how on earth do economists even calculate this huge number? Well, they've got 3 different ways to look at it. And in a perfect world, All three methods should give you the exact same result.
You can measure it based on what was produced. That's the production method. So the total value of all the cars, phones, and services made in a year. Or you can measure it by what was earned. That's the income method, where you add up all the wages, rent, interest, and profits. And third, you can measure what was spent. That's the expenditure method, and we've already seen its formula, C plus I plus G plus X minus N.
All right, we have covered a lot of ground. So now it's time for what might be the most important slide in this entire explainer for your last-minute revision. Here are all the key formulas, all in one place. I would seriously recommend you take a screenshot of this right now. This is your ultimate cheat sheet for the relationships between GNP and GDP, the net concepts, disposable income, and even converting from market price to factor cost. This is pure exam gold, right here. So, after this quick tour, how are you feeling? These concepts aren't so confusing once you see how they all logically connect, are they? The real question now is, how are you going to use this newfound clarity to